Martin Delaney, aka Jason Summerbee, joins me to talk about the show, obviously, and the experience of working on the show, and also a little bit later as well, what he's doing these days. Welcome to the podcast, Martin. How is your current situation? How are you fixed right now?
Hi, Jamie. Yeah, thank you very much. I mean, thanks for asking me to be on the show, and I can't believe there's so many Rejects fans out there these days. It's amazing. Yeah, it's lovely. Yeah, this whole lockdown thing has been pretty strange, as it has for everyone. I'm now in what's a sort of makeshift home studio, which is essentially in my cupboard in my house, because my wife and I do a lot of voice work from home as well. So, yeah, I mean, it's a whole new normal, and it's great to be able to chat about something that we made years ago and still have a lot of fondness for. So thank you for having me on.
No, that's quite all right. I mean, it's so good to be able to talk to you, because I am such a fan of this show. I have watched those episodes so many times, I am one of those fans. So don't worry. I'll try not to get too geeky here.
No, not at all. I mean, not at all. It's it's really quite flattering that it's had such an impact on people. And largely, I guess, because of Nickelodeon running it for so long. But yeah, it was a fun time. So please ask away, and please don't worry.
Well, I mean, the first thing was, it came out in 1998, which was the first time that it hit the screens, and it's the 20th anniversary this year of it leaving. It ran for 4 series and over 50 episodes, which I still have to pinch myself. It's like, that's a lot of episodes. But how did it start for you? Where did the journey begin?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, it's quite interesting what you were saying there about the episodes in terms of content size. I guess we look at it a lot as content these days, but it's at the time, I know that the producer behind the show, Steve Baywell, was really looking at this stuff in the way that people looked at content like The Simpsons, where you could buy a project and you'd have this package of so many episodes. So the plan was always to try and get a load of episodes done. And we did it for as long as we could, and before we all started looking a bit older. And we would be shooting sort of 13 episodes a season, with the possibility, I think, every year we were maybe going to do 2 seasons back to back and do 26. It never really worked out that way. We ended up just having a year off in between. But yeah, it was a load of episodes, as you mentioned there. But yeah, I got started in it much like everyone else. I'd started doing some acting as a sort of teenager. I'd started to really, understand that I wanted to be involved in acting in some way, and did some stuff at school and all this kind of stuff, like a lot of young people. And my history at that point was that I had I'd landed a job in the West End doing a musical in London, and I don't come from a musical background. Like, I'm not much of a singing and dancing family. And my parents didn't really know anything about acting. They were big fans of cinema and TV, but didn't really know much about that world. And I'd done a play at school because my teachers were trying to encourage me, and then I went for an open audition for a musical in the West End, which was Oliver at the Palladium, and I got in it. Weirdly, after queuing up with all these kids. And so in the meantime, I joined a young person's agency, like an acting agency. I was about 15. Excuse me. And I just, I didn't know much about this world, but then I'd go up for auditions, right? I'd get, my agent as a teenager would call my folks, or call the house at least, and say, right, you've got to go for this job. And here's the stuff, here's what you got to look into or learn, or, so that we used to, I'd go for a few auditions. I did the odd little bit landed a bit of TV, and I'd sort of started to make some projects, very small episodes and stuff, Pie in the Sky and all these sort of dramas that were on in the 90s as well. And just, went along to an audition, as ever, learned these lines for Jason, who was, as you know, mouthy and cocky and a pain in the backside. And just kept going for different rounds. And I remember we had a big audition at the Actors Centre, which is in central London, near sort of between Leicester Square and Seven Dials. And there was quite a few kids or young people, in these auditions and going into rooms and coming out. And so we sort of got a glimpse of some of the people that were going in as well and going up for different parts. Got to read with a couple of them. I think I read with Charlie Rowlands, in that audition there at some point. We played Ben Phillips, Ben and I. And then eventually we went to a final audition, which was at where Renford Rec was, which was Willesden football pitch, park or whatever. And that was brutal because there was two of each of us. We really got to see the other people that were auditioning for these roles. And we had to play quite a lot of football. I think the thing that people maybe don't know, I don't know if Roger mentioned this or the guys mentioned this, is that we needed to be all right at football because there were moments where we would always look pretty good. And then there were moments where we would look really crap, which was the majority of the time. So they needed us to be relatively fit and relatively capable so that when there was a moment of okay, then Jason does this, it could be okay. So football actually featured quite heavily in that final audition, and knowing that we could sort of play a bit and handle it. And I'm not much of a footballer, I've got to be honest. I'm all right, but my brother was a pro footballer. So I had a bit of football background in our family. Certainly, my dad was a good footballer, and we have another professional in the family. And then way back, we have another star. So, football had always featured in our lives. So it was a really cool job to go for, and it made a lot of sense. I was going to play someone who was a bit crap, which in my family unit, I felt I sort of identified with that because I was nowhere near as good as my brother. So it was oh yeah, I could play a rubbish footballer. That would make sense. I just went along and landed the part, which was amazing. Just such good fun, and exciting.
Yeah, I mean, it started off. I mean, the way that Roger and Tom have talked about it, you were filming sort of in the summertime, and it was something very kind of magical about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think especially for guys like Tom and Roger and I think we were the younger ones in the show. I was 17, I think, when I started. Matthew Leach, who played Stuart, was older and had finished drama school, so he was at least 21, 22. The same with Paul Paris, who played Bruno. Paul was, I think, 22 or 23 when he started the show. So these guys had, Matt had been through drama school. Paul had a screen career of sorts and had a real background in the industry. But Rog and Tom and I were quite young and quite close to the age of the kids we were playing. And I guess relatively inexperienced in comparison. So yeah, it was a lot of fun being able to just go. We shot the pilot, then we waited. We actually shot the pilot in 1996, and then I think we came back to film in 1997, the actual series, with a couple of adjustments to the pilot. And then it releasing in I think it would have been about springtime to 1998. So yeah, it would be when I was doing A levels at the time when I was filming that show, and it was deliberately, I guess, through the summer break where they knew they could get everyone for longer. But I loved it. I mean, the idea that we could just get together and have a lot of fun together and play football. And enjoy those varying British summers. It was good. Yeah, it was. There's some really, really positive memories of that time for sure.
So you mentioned the pilot there, which you shot, you say, in around 96.
Yeah, the year
Is
earlier.
that the same? That did you reshoot that, or is there another pilot floating around somewhere?
No, so what we actually shot, really interesting. Well, I say it's interesting. It probably isn't interesting because I'm not that interesting. But we shot the pilot with an actor called Campbell Morrison playing Eddie. So we had a different guy playing Eddie. you'll notice that like I'm a right chubby little upstart in the first episodes, and then like as the seasons go on, I lose a bit of weight, and that's because the pilot and the rest of even season 1, there's a year between it. So by a year, the following summer, I was physically a little bit different, but we reshot some of that episode where Eddie was in it. And so there's actually a really funny bit at the end. It's a real like Easter egg. If you watch the end of the first episode, One of the Guys, you'll see that when Holly Davidson's character scores a goal, I think it's like we score 1 goal. I can't really remember, but we're being, you'll know better than me, Jamie. Do we lose that game against the Razors? Is that what happens?
Yeah, 5-1.
And so we score 1 goal, is that right?
Yes.
So Holly scores that goal, Robin scores, and then at the end we're all over the moon because we got a goal. And so we're cheering, and you'll notice that in the park, a man runs over and hugs us all. That is the old actor who played Eddie in that scene. And then Alex Norton is never replaced in that scene. We never shot that end of that football match again. So the end of the football match, just some random guy runs up and starts hugging us all. And that is the old Eddie, which is still in episode 1, I believe. It's a bit weird.
That's genius. I mean, was there a reason why they replaced that actor? Do you know?
Yeah, good question. No, actually, I don't think there was a problem as such. I think it was just more about schedules and stuff. I think Campbell couldn't make the show the following year or something like that. And actually, my God, much as Campbell was a lovely guy and a lovely actor, I mean, we ended up with Alex Norton, who's just brilliant and a fine actor and someone I always admired anyway. I'd seen him pop up in screen work before and really identified with his work. He was a young actor too. He'd been a sort of teenage actor and had then carried on through the years. And a really, really, really lovely actor, lovely guy. And so he and Sally Kinghorn were on the job. Sally always played Priscilla. And they were actual partners in real life. Sally and Alex were together, and so when the problems came up around schedule, I don't know if they went to Sally or spoke to her at all. But Alex had done a lot of screen work and obviously went for the job and landed it. So Sally and Alex were working together pretty regularly on the same gig, which must have been a lot of fun.
Well, you've told me something I didn't know. I was not aware of that whatsoever, but it does bring up that, as you point out there, you worked with a lot of more kind of experienced actors, including, as you say, Alex Norton and Sally, and of course Bill Homewood, who we've had on the podcast, who is
a lovely guy,
quite a character off and on screen.
Absolutely. I mean, so you did an interview with Bill, didn't you? I had a little listen to some of that stuff. I mean, he's just a lovely guy. He's one of these guys, because obviously being the rival, but was in that first episode as the teacher who's acting as a kind of foil for us immediately. He's the reason, of course, none of us get into the school team. And Bill just had this. Bill's such a lovely man, and he's had an amazing career, and he was always so kind to us. I think we were really lucky on that show in that all the adults that we had, older adults that were working with us, were just so affectionate and kind. They all had a lot of time for us and a lot of respect. And I think it's quite, there's this whole myth, right, in TV and film and theatre where you don't work with children or animals. And some of us were pretty immature kids at that time. We were teenagers, but we were youngsters, and I'm so grateful for how well they treated us all and how patient they were with us and how nurturing, and Bill is absolutely a champion at that. He was really good to work with. We actually got to do a fair few bits, especially in the later seasons, and we had a lovely episode together where he sort of brings me under the wing of the Razors and I sort of double cross them. But he's just such a charming man and good fun. And my fondest memories of Bill were when we all went away in season 4 and we all got to go to Sardinia to shoot, and we filmed 3 episodes over there. And so we all really got to hang out as well. So we were not only filming these few episodes in Sardinia, but then it meant that when we went away from the set in the evening, we were all in the same hotels. So we could have dinner and drinks together. And obviously we were all that little bit older then. I was sort of 20 by the time the show was finishing, 19, 20. So we could, actually get to know them, in a different way. So when you're away on a job, it's always the sort of luxury of the work, that you get to sort of know each other and bond a bit better, which we thankfully did. Lovely, man.
It does seem as though in the history of this program, all the time you were making it, that trip to Sardinia has kind of crossed into mythical legend, I think, somewhat.
Yeah. I mean, it was so unusual. For a start, the show was quite unusual in a number of ways and for a number of reasons for us, because it was shot quite uniquely for a show of that period and for a kids show. And, we'd been filming in West London for 3 seasons. We really got used to knowing what we would, how the show ran. We were like, okay, yeah, here it is again. We come up and we work here and we play football and we do this. But then season 4 started and Stephen was like, is our exec producer, he said, we're going to do 3 episodes away now this season. We were like, what? Yeah, we're going to go to Sardinia. I mean, I'd barely heard of Sardinia at that point. I didn't really know much about the place. As it happens, I've been really, really lucky to work there a number of times over the years since I finished that show and beyond as an actor, including only a couple of years ago, I worked on George Clooney's Catch-22 show, and we shot that out there again. And it's a beautiful place. And yeah, it became this really gorgeous kind of retreat in the middle of season 4, where we were like, right, we're now going to go and do these kind of really beautiful episodes in the sunshine. It's like, wow, how lucky are we? We don't have to wait for any cloud cover and any rain coming through the shot. We can really just keep going and explore these really unusual ideas, which we did. Do you know which episodes were shot in Sardinia, Jamie? Do you know which ones?
I want to say you did a Western parody, which might have been shot over there. You did one on the beach somewhere, beach ball, I want to say. And there was also the Roman takeoff. Which,
that was, so Rome was in like series 3, I think, or series 2, series 3, I think. So it's a really weird one because it didn't really need to be over there, apart from they've got beautiful golf courses. It was the golf episode when we shot that in Sardinia as well. So yeah, the cowboy, which was mad fun but like nuts. Like what? Alexi Sale came and joined us in that episode. He's a really lovely guy and a good friend of Stephen's. And actually Alexi, as you'll know, sort of popped up in an earlier series just doing like a couple of lines, because he's a pal of Steve's. And Steve was like, you're coming back and I'm going to make sure it's a nice episode. So when Sardinia, the Wild West episode was going to happen, it was like, yep, come on. So Alexi really kindly came out and did that with us, and Bill got to do some lovely stuff in there and really show off his horse riding. He's a great horse rider, Bill. And I'm a pretty good horse rider as well, so it's nice. It was nice to have a go at all that stuff. I don't think I was much good then. but yeah, great fun. I mean, what a trip, and the golf stuff as well.
Yeah, and it introduced, certainly in the later series, the idea of the fantasy episodes. That's kind of what I've labelled them anyway, the kind of fantasy episodes, the one where you're not just stuck in one place, as you say, you got to go out and kind of explore different stories.
Yeah, I think it's funny because like the show, I don't know if people knew this, but the show was nominated for a BAFTA in season 1. It was up for, best young drama, I think. And actually it's funny because it was really lovely to get nominated, and we all got to go and be there and stuff. But it was really like a comic show more than it was a drama. And Steve's whole premise with the show was to really make this kind of cartoon with actors. That was what he wanted. So that's why the show's really colourful. You'll notice that people always talk about the strips we were wearing, but I was kind of known for wearing that Hull City shirt with this random like green shorts and then bright orange socks. And the idea was that, you'd look at that and be like, okay, that just looks like this. And you'll notice as well that we never change out of those clothes. I'm in my school uniform, Jason's kind of training kit, or our Renford Rejects football strip. There's the occasional little tweak, actually, when we had a different costume designer for one of the seasons, and actually we quickly went back to the old costume designer. But, Steve really wanted us to be like, no, they just look like that. When you see them, they look like that all the time. And that's very much a cartoon trope, right? That they don't ever really change out of the clothing they're in. Like Donald Duck is noticeable because of the fact that it's just a blue jacket and the hat, and that's it. And so there was a real decision to sort of keep it quite bright, quite colourful. And so there was this sense that even though we'd explored some quite bizarre ideas in the early seasons, we'd not really gone down a major fantasy route, which of course we could because the remit was a cartoon with actors. And so, we started to explore some of those nutty ideas, and some of them worked and some of them didn't, but it was good fun. I mean, we had a lot of fun making them, especially the Roman episode. The Rome episode was great.
Yeah, it looks fun. Do you always look like you had a great sort of camaraderie with things? Now, to talk about the earlier seasons where it was, as you say, sort of a cartoony type thing, but a little bit more laid back. Jason's character, I mean, he's often compared these days to Jay from The In-Betweeners, but I always think of like Colin from Press Gang, which was a show a few years earlier. They're almost, even I think it was Paul Reynolds that played the character, I want to say, and you're pretty much same hairstyle, same style going on, same kind of act. I mean, was that inspired in any way, the character of Jason, by basically anything before it?
Yeah, interesting question. I mean, I think you're really like onto something, I think, in terms of like trends that were coming up in shows. Press Gang was great, but I didn't watch a whole lot of it. But I think certainly in terms of formula in writing, I think you're absolutely right that these characters come up again and again in some form. And James Buckley actually and I, who played Jay in The In-Betweeners, got to chat when we did a job together a few years back, Rock and Chips, which is a sort of Only Fools and Horses prequel. And we were talking because he did love the show. And so we've sort of joked about it a little bit before on social media. But yeah, I think, you do see these tropes and these characters come up a hell of a lot. But actually, I think what I was trying to bring, interestingly, because we then worked together on Rock and Chips, but I was trying to bring a sort of Del Boy element from Only Fools to Renford Rejects. That's how I saw him. We had these character biographies when we were starting the show that were really in depth, that Stephen designed with Chris Wilson and Patrick Buckley, who were the writers. And they were really beautiful because they gave you so much backstory about these people and so much to get your teeth into. And actually loads of it was never going to be explored on screen, but it meant that you could play that. So the fact that, like, I knew when I was playing that character, for example, that Jason was from a working class, broken home. I was aware that that was his upbringing, that his father wasn't around. He'd sort of idolized his father. And I think you'd still get a little bit of the pain of that in that guy. All of his bravado, all of his like showing and trying to be talk himself up comes from really deep down feeling like he's no one. And season 1 goes near that a little bit in the exploration of him not having enough money and not being able to do the same things as the other rejects can do. But ultimately, it just cements the character and holds the performance. You don't need to see that coming up again, or it just helps you to understand where he comes from, or what, why does, psychologically speaking, why is someone so cocky, so confident, have so much, I guess, confidence in themselves, regardless of their true ability. It must come from, to put on such a show, it obviously comes from not really thinking much of yourself truly. And so we were lucky to have that background explored for us when we landed the roles. And it's something that I've chatted about occasionally on social media when people have asked me about it, is that Jason's dad, he'd sort of held up as this amazing footballer. And the reality was that his dad had played for Hull City Reserves, and not much either. So Jason, even though a Londoner, had sort of idolised his father, his missing father now, it was a lovely thing to sort of have in there and to be able to play.
It sounds like they really thought of everything. And when I think of the character of Jason, when I'm looking at it with my creative, productive head on, all I keep thinking is, you had so many lines at such a speed. I mean, how much of it was what was written down on the paper and how much of it was you improvising?
Well, I think we were really lucky. I was talking about the adult actors in the show earlier who were really, really generous with us and pretty forgiving when we were, being a bit of a pain in the arse or whatever. But actually, I think one of the things that really comes across in the show, look, it's been a long time since I've watched some episodes back, but one of the things that I know I enjoyed at the time was that I felt very secure being in the show. And what I mean by that is that we were really trusted as performers. I mean, we were young people, and some, as I say, some of us younger than others, especially in the main cast. But this American sort of producers who were making the show were really careful about their casting, and then there was a lot of trust given to us when we were on the shoot. So we'd spend 4 weeks rehearsing. I mean, it's unheard of now in television and film, but we would spend 4 weeks rehearsing the scripts and playing football and getting ready, and then a further 7 weeks, I think, filming, where we would film 2 episodes a week. Now, what happened in that rehearsal period is we'd have a rough go at choreographing some of the scenes so that we were getting in the flow of this kind of new way of working. We'd also get fit, but we would also discuss the scripts. So we'd have a round table with Stephen Baywell and Chris and Patrick. We'd read through the scripts together on the first couple of days and really unpack them, like you would do in theatre. So we'd go, actually, what do we think about this? And is this realistic? How do we feel about that? And these people were asking us as well. That was what was incredible. What do you think about this? What do you think? And we were really given this permission to support the project in the way that I support a project when I go on a set now, where your input is somewhat valued. But actually, it wasn't usual when I was a young actor. People didn't often value your input at all. But Stephen was always trying to nurture this atmosphere where it's like, okay, can you create a bit of business in the background of this scene? What can you guys do in the back of this scene while this is going on? Or, so the ad-lib nature of the show was nurtured. It wasn't always stuff that came up on the day. It's something we'd planned in rehearsals. But often there were massive chunks that came up in the day, and Roger and I had a lot of fun doing that stuff. We loved messing around and trying to bring new stuff into it and I guess make each other laugh a little bit.
Yeah, which I'm sure people will be going back now to look to see, what it is you're referring to, if indeed you're referring to anything in particular. But there was such an unusual way, and we've touched upon this on previous podcasts with guests from the show that you worked on, that it was such an unusual way of working, because you'd have sort of 3 to 5 minute scenes with no cuts whatsoever, and you'd have a jib shot sort of just moving. And again, working with people like Bill, who are probably used to memorizing a lot of dialogue and knowing exactly where. And thank you for telling us, actually, that you had so much rehearsal. I suppose it was second nature, but it must have still been quite a training ground for you working in that environment. Absolutely.
Look, it's a funny show because, look, I still get the piss taken out of me for being in that show. And actually, people are quite funny about... I get this quite a lot as well. People are quite funny because of the age they watched it and when it was on. A lot of people were watching it in their teens and a bit younger. And, what do we, in terms of, I know my own memories of being a teenager. There's a lot of rebellious stuff going on. And there's a lot of rejecting, ironically, a lot of what's going on in your life. And so people often say to me in a quiet moment, I used to watch that show. And they're kind of embarrassed they used to watch it because it's a show about a bunch of losers. And it really shows where people are in terms of psyche, because it's not a show about a bunch of winners. There's this kind of shame about enjoying it in the past. And I find that comes up quite a lot. I find that quite funny. And I still get a lot of stick for it, regardless of, the work I've done or whatever. But people have a real fondness for it. But I think the real intention with Steve was to get us in the swing of working that way. We didn't really rehearse the hell out of stuff, but we got used to him coming in and saying, okay, so let's look at this 4-page scene and we're going to work on some choreography now and we're going to see if we can pick it up. And so we'd be walking around with the scripts in our hands, doing this kind of fluid kind of camera work. For those people that don't really know much about it, it's that Rejects was shot on a handheld camera and the scenes were quite choreographed. As Jamie said there, they were like 3 to 5 minute scenes sometimes where everything was quite intricate in where you stood. And that was quite cinematic. It's quite unusual. Most TV shows, you do coverage where you shoot a wide shot, you do a close-up or a medium shot, and then you do that on every person and then the editor cuts it together. And in Rejects, we would choreograph the scene so that the scene meant that everyone was in vision or not, as required, as they said the lines, and then that's the scene. The scene doesn't need any editing, it's done. But then, you might, what that meant is we would do like 20 takes. We would do like 15 takes of scenes, which is quite unusual, and I know the jib operators who these are the guys that man the crane. They loved doing the show because as a jib operator, your main job was to go along to soaps or shows that, doing some dramas or whatever, and they were used to shoot establishing shots of buildings. So this cafe. And then that's your work done. All right, fine, you've done your establishing shots. Thank you, bye. And in Rejects, we would choreograph whole scenes around the jib arm. So the guy, Mike, who was our jib operator for most of the time, would come in and pick up a 2-shot with me and someone else, for example, and then we'd walk and the crane would move, and then it would go over and around us and find someone else, and then they would start talking. And it was the same sort of choreography as we had in the cafe, but it was all done on a crane, which was really unusual. So the jib operators loved doing it. Mike loved doing the show because it meant he could be creative. And it was really unusual. It was really cinematic, and it was really, for a kids' show, it was pretty unusual. And don't get me wrong, there's problems with that too, I think. Did you notice any problems with that, Jamie, when you watched the show?
Well, I mean, I assume majority of the issues are edited out, but is there anything that comes to mind for you when you think of issues?
I think just in terms of, look, I work a bit behind the camera now as well, and I think the things that come up as being problematic is that, yes, you can't edit your way out of a problem. But also it meant that sometimes I think jokes were lost because actually some of the writing was pretty good. And there were moments where you really needed the pace of someone coming in with their punchline or at least their cue line for someone else pretty quickly. Now, if you're waiting for a camera operator to get into position and you're choreographing that scene, you can lose something, you can lose energy. And of course in the edit, normally with normal footage, you can go and speed up the reaction time between those two people because you can take a bit of the space out. You can't do that in a scene that you've choreographed with everyone in it. So it had its challenges, not just for us as actors, but I think in terms of like what you're left with at the other side. But it was a beautiful training ground for us. It was a really effective training ground because it just meant you had to be on it. You really had to be in the moment and on it. And I think it certainly taught me a lot, certainly about camera work. My love of directing and being interested in behind the camera came from Pierre Beaufetty, who was our DP on the show, French guy. And Pierre had won the equivalent of like a French Academy Award for documentary filmmaking. And he had this very particular style where he would hold the camera on his shoulder, have like a handheld, and he was doing handheld work before other people because it had been his bread and butter in documentary. So, my love of all of that work and a lot of my nurturing experience on the show came from working closely with Pierre. He's a really good guy.
And it's where the unique look of it comes from. And certainly to a non-fan, if you were to explain the Rejects, you think, well, they're all regular actors just doing their job. But you had lots of guest stars on there as well who perhaps weren't used to working in that particular environment.
That's right.
What was that like?
Yeah, that's right. It's funny that because it's not something that I look back on and notice. I think everyone who came in took it really well, and I think generally speaking, our football was still shot. We used a lot of crane shots and stuff in the football stuff, but generally speaking, we would alter the way we shot some of the football stuff a bit differently. You'd have the normal cuts in there, but yeah. You're right, so it must be a bit of an ask for people coming in, but we did have some wonderful guest stars, and you wouldn't have known they were trying to adjust to that. And I think normally when you go and do a TV job or a film job, you're used to doing maybe, on a film or whatever, you're used to doing like maybe a couple of scenes like that throughout the whole film where it's all one shot and you're really like pumped and you know that they're going to... But actually to do every scene like that is a bit tricky. Yeah, we were really lucky. I mean, look, gosh, Tony Slattery coming in and just being brilliant. I mean, he was lovely. And Alexei obviously coming in a couple of times. David Baddiel came and did an episode. This is the height of, him and Frank Skinner, doing their stuff. And he just like, I'm going to go and do this little kids football show. And then all the players, we were so lucky with the players.
Oh, I mean, it was, I think, I know this is a 90s and noughties podcast. I'm supposed to gush over the period, but it really was a golden period for football in general, because certainly when the Rejects first came up, we were just about to go into the World Cup. We'd had obviously Euro 96, and by the time you'd finished, you'd had Euro 2000 into the next World Cup. It was very much, Beckham, Scholes, Giggs, these massive players, and of course some of the stars that you guys had, including Zola, Keown for one episode, with that wonderful plot twist at the end. It's an amazing thing. It's one for any writer, I would suggest going to look at, because it's a very basic thing, and you keep describing it as a kids show, but there was a lot in that writing that was a lot cleverer than perhaps you'd think for a kids show.
That's a really interesting point, and I think that was really conscious. It's funny the amount of people that that aren't ashamed to talk about how much they loved it, talking about how they watch it now and really love it, revisiting the show. There's lots of madness and over the top performances, and we were doing this kind of heightened style of acting. But yeah, I think when you look back, I mean, gosh, there was so many, good guest stars coming in and doing. I mean, that episode in particular is so lovely. Gosh, I can't remember what you asked me then.
Well, mainly about the writing.
Yeah, that's it. Sorry, I lost my thread.
No, that's all right.
I'm doing a proper Jason now, just like off in my own world. No, it was what was amazing is that it was a really conscious effort from the guys. Stephen wanted to. He had this. I remember him talking to us in series 1, and he said, and it's really the model that Pixar followed when they started launching into the sort of into the cinema stuff, and before Disney took them on. But Steve was like, if we get kids decide what goes on in the house. He was really in touch with that. And he said, so if we get the kids, which we're going to, this is a Nickelodeon show, we have to understand that we're getting the parents. And that's why our guest stars were people like, Brian Sewell, the art critic coming in to do an episode. No kid's going to know who the hell Brian Sewell is, in an artist episode, but adults knew who Brian Sewell was then. No kids knew who David Baddiel was, even though, as you said, we had all the, Euro 96 stuff. Adults knew exactly who he was. Alexei Sayle his audience base also were adults, of my parents' age who loved his work. And so there was this real sense of, when we get the guest stars, this is where we're aiming, because this is where we've got to satisfy. So, having Peter Shilton come in to do an episode, having the 66 World Cup team come and do an episode. Again, no kids are going to really care about who those guys are. It was just so the folks at home watching, if they managed to watch it with their kids or were like, what's that? They'd be like, what's Jeff Hurst? What's Sir Jeff Hurst doing in this kids' football show? And Stan Bowles, Stan and I became really good friends after shooting the show. And my dad, my dad loved him as a footballer, and being a big footballing family, we all sort of got on like a house on fire. But yeah, I mean, it was really quite. They were trying to aim for that bit older at the same time, which I think was really quite clever.
Which is, I think, something that kind of harks back to what they were doing, certainly in British children's television in the 60s and 70s, where they realised that adults were watching as well. So they'd put these little things in. But that's a subject for another day. But I find... thank you for being so honest, by the way, about how this show was made and all the tiny little bits and pieces. And I realise, as we said earlier, it's been 20 years since it's ended. And have you seen much of your fellow cast members from that show?
Yeah, I mean, little bits and pieces. I mean, it's a weird one, isn't it? Because it's, as you say, I mean, gosh, finished 20 years ago. And I think in terms of how it was made, that sticks in my mind because I had an interest in that world. But yeah, I mean, Matt Leach and I are, good pals, and we've not seen each other for a little bit, and obviously with this lockdown stuff. But, we hung out a lot more actually once we finished the shoot. Actually, by the time Matt left, we were both living around the same area and became really good pals. And so by the time I was of my drinking age, then we could sort of go out and hang out a lot more. And Roger and I still catch up. He's such a good guy, and he was over from Los Angeles not that long ago, before all the lockdown stuff as well. And we caught up and reminisced. And Roger and I actually got to work together again post Rejects. We got to do a soap together. In England for a while. Yeah,
he told me about that. Yeah, it was weird because you guys sort of became friends on the show.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, they kind of brought him in as a sort of, I guess, as a character that was going to sort of be, I was playing another bad boy, in this kind of soap, and playing another sort of, problematic teenager, stroke young adult, in Family Affairs. And Rog followed me in and came in a little while later. And we had some lovely stuff together. We had some, playing dodgy lads together. I stuck around it a little bit longer and then left. And so, but it's really lovely getting to work with people pretty well like that again. And Tom lives not too far from me and knows the family. I know his family. Tom and I weirdly went to school together, which was a really weird coincidence. We went to a school in Chislehurst, and actually a lot of people came out of that school that have stuck in the arts and the performing world. Like my cousin was there for a while, Kevin Bishop, who's a comedy actor. Tom was obviously there. Rob Beckett, comedian, was also at this school, and Tom Allen as well. A lot of comedy people. And the school really nurtured this kind of stuff. They were really good at keeping the kind of performing arts and stuff alive in the school. And so weirdly, Tom and I had been to school with each other briefly before he went off. He switched schools. So we'd sort of known each other. We were in opposite sides of the year group, so we didn't get to see each other that much. But we sort of knew of each other. And then in season 1, he wasn't around that much, so we didn't really get a chance to bond in the same way. But he's such a good guy and a lovely actor. And so we got to see a bit more of each other as the series went on. And as I say, he doesn't live too far at all and from where I am now. And so every now and then we're lucky enough to see each other. But Holly Davidson as well is an old friend, and we still keep in touch. But there's a few of the guys I've just not seen for a while, as ever. You know, people kind of go off and do their own thing, and yeah, it'd be good to catch up.
Well, hopefully that can happen, certainly once all the lockdown stuff is over. And I realise I wouldn't personally ask this question, but I know that there are fans that are probably screaming at whatever device they're listening to this on. Where is Adam Dean?
I don't know. It's a really funny one. Someone tweeted me about that a while ago, did they? And I was like, yeah, I don't know what's happened to Adam. He's a lovely lad, and obviously was just around for a couple of seasons, and I've not seen him for years. I've not seen Paul for years. Matt and I saw Lucy, bumped into Lucy a little while afterwards, and obviously she's doing really well. But I there's Charlie, who played Ben. We were really close, and again we've not seen each other for a long time, just because of the way our lives went. He lives down by the coast now, and. But he's a really good lad. I mean, he was always really funny, super funny, and a good fella. Really great actor. And so we some of us have just not. I think Paul lives. Does Paul live abroad now or something? I don't know. But there's some of the guys I've just not seen for such a long time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as you quite rightly say, you've all had your own direction to go in since the show ended. I mean, you've done loads of stuff, haven't you? You mentioned Rock and Chips earlier, which you did. I saw you in Josh Widdicombe's sitcom.
Oh yeah,
quite recently, which was very good in an Indian restaurant.
Basically playing an idiot again.
Is that a typecasting thing, or is that just you just really
me,
good
Jamie? Yeah, that's just
right.
Me. No, it's no. I think it's look. It's I have been really lucky over the years to sort of do a lot of varied work. But I think in British comedy, I did like Him and Her, which is a lovely show, and Josh, and Two Pints of Lager years ago as well. And the sort of comedy work I do, I tend to sort of play a very close or version of a chap that's quite similar to Jason, I think. That lad who thinks they're nothing inside and then has to cover it all up with all this bravado. And I think Josh was a really good example of that episode of Josh where I was playing this guy who kind of fooled around behind his fiance's back all these and had actually slept with B.T. Edmondson's character before, and Josh and Ellis was supposed to have known him from university, and they're in the same restaurant, and he's got no sense, he's got no shame, this guy, so he's got no sense of he's sharing a table with these two guys that don't really like him and a girl that he slept with while he was, with his fiance or to-be fiance, and has no shame in still proposing to her in front of all these people, even though it's not the best idea. So yeah, I've been really lucky, to sort of, I'm sort of people ask me to play that kind of role every now and then, and I did a lovely pilot for the BBC a little while back called Hailmakers, with a wonderful producer writer John McQueen, who I really like his work, and a similar type of guy really. But in film and television, in drama, I've been really lucky in that I tend to play some parts where I don't use my own accent and very different types of characters, and especially the American stuff. So yeah, I mean, it's, I think actors always tend to have a little bit of a niche in places, and but I think I've been lucky enough that it's been varied enough to keep me interested and keep me going, thank God.
And when you're doing these roles, because you've done TV, you've done film, and have you done a bit of stage work as well?
Yeah, I started in musical theatre and did a couple of musicals in the West End for a few years really, and then I went, I've been back on stage in sort of I've not done a musical for years, but like in straight theatre for every now and then. In fact, Mo George, who came in and did season 4. And replaced Matt when he left. Mo George and I had done a play for a lovely writer called Roy Williams, who's a fantastic theatre writer. And one of Roy's plays we did at the over in Swiss Cottage, at the Hampstead Theatre years ago. And in fact, it was in between seasons. So Steve Baywell, I don't know if Mo knows this even, but Steve Baywell, who produced Renford Rejects, came to watch me in that play, and Mo was in it with me. And so Mo, I don't think he landed the part because he was in that and Steve remembered him, but they got him in the room. He's a great actor. And so when he was in the room, they just smashed it. And so, he ended up coming in and playing Dennis. But, doing that play, which was also about a working class, kind of young, rough and ready football team at the time, it was definitely had an influence, because Steve saw the play. But, yeah, and then I've been back on stage a few times doing some pieces over at like Southwark Playhouse and sort of quite intimate theatres. I really miss theatre, especially in this environment now, where we've got all these lockdowns and stuff. It's an industry that's really suffering. But I love screen work too. I've been really fortunate to do a few films over the years and got to work with some amazing people in doing those jobs, including some directors that I really, really admire. So I feel very fortunate to have done that.
How often do people bring up the Rejects when you're doing any of this stuff?
It's weird. I think guys of like my age now, who are like my peers as actors and I see on jobs, when we get to know each other, they tend to go, I used to watch that when I was young, and it always surprises me because I didn't have Nickelodeon, and so I didn't have the experience of being like a fan of the show in any way. I just had my experience of what a laugh it was making it. And no real concept of like, people would obviously recognise us and stuff like that, but I had no concept of what it was like to consume all that material and see what it was like, and obviously fall in love with those characters or not, as the case may be. So yeah, it's quite interesting to hear, people that have seen it, and I think also people that expect me to be just as sort of London or just as there's a I think it's just it's weird, isn't it? It's people who like these shows or have watched these shows, it's you're not going to satisfy every need on them, but thankfully I've got a motor mouth just like Jason, so it's okay. But I've been lucky, I think, to work with a lot of British actors over the years who did watch it when I worked on The Promise with Peter Kosminski years ago. It's a wonderful drama, and a few of the central cast members, Max and stuff, had been fans of the show. So it's really lovely to chat with him about it. But not so much in the American projects that I do. Like, they don't tend to have a clue, obviously, for obvious reasons. But yeah, it's good fun.
It still amazes me now that although it was Nickelodeon's first kind of UK project,
yes,
and it's sort of fronted by American kind of influence, and yet it is so British, in the way in which it just kind of came about and everything, just the subject matter, I think. Although I always think that show kind of transcended football. It was about lots of different things, as you say, with your character descriptions. And with that in mind, and I asked this, I know you've listened to previous interviews, you probably know what I'm going to ask here, but if somehow we could take a peek into Jason's world right now, where do you think he would be?
Oh gosh, that's really interesting. Yeah, I forgot you like to ask that. God. I don't know. It's a weird one, isn't it? I think, if I'm honest, I think Jason would have been a big success. And part of me thinks it's because he could just talk his way into and out of anything. And there's a lot of people that love that kind of bullshit. And so I wonder whether he'd have just... Look, he wasn't the brightest... Well, he wasn't academically bright, we could say. But he probably was quite sharp. I guess... I wonder whether he would have just sort of gone and become like, one of these like early burnout traders, I wonder if he'd have become a city boy or an estate agent and really like used the gift of the gab to sort of get ahead. Maybe like a city trader, done really well. It wouldn't surprise me, like, if he had like a kind of sociopath career where he's like a city trader, earns loads of money, then gets found out. Everyone realises that he's just actually a bit of a lunatic. And then sort of maybe retires young. I don't know really, because there's definitely a version of Jason as well that's just running the local burger van, and so it's a hard one. I'd say optimistically, I'd love it, if he did quite well for himself, but I don't think that would be the end of the journey. I think he's the sort of lad that might reflect on making it in speech marks and realising that it's not all it cracked up to be, and what he really missed is just playing football with his friends.
That's a really interesting analysis, and I think it's one that can come from you because you read all the character bio and you've obviously had time to, I realise I sprung that question on you, but it must sometimes. Sorry,
what do you think he'd have done? Because I think that's quite interesting.
Well, a lot of the answers that I've received have been around them somehow going into football and being successful in football. But like you say, I am in agreement with you that I think as a character, he had an ability to kind of talk his way out of things.
Yeah.
And, very much the gift of the gab. The motor mouth, the mouth as it was sometimes called, and there are certain jobs in which that is very handy.
Yeah.
But that's I will say it again. I think it's a good analysis of it. I don't think he would be writing his autobiography.
That's right.
Like Bill said about his character.
Yes. I mean, wherever he is, I hope he's doing okay, and I hope he's all right, and not too washed up like in Cobra Kai or whatever. But it would be fun to think about what he's up to. Yeah,
I'm sure there's some fan fiction somewhere. There must be.
Yeah, if not yet, soon.
Possibly off the back of this. We'll have to wait and see about that. Well, Martin, it's been an absolute joy to talk to you about this because, like I said, I've been a fan since the beginning, and I've done these interviews, and I never expected to be able to, I never thought as like a 10, 11, 12-year-old, I'd never get to, I never thought I'd be able to talk to the cast members that were in the screen. So it's been absolutely wonderful, and thank you for joining us.
No, thank you for asking me to do it, and I hope we didn't disappoint in real life, but it was a good fun time. So thank you so much, Jamie, and thank you for everyone who watched it back then. It's still a very fond memory for me, even these days. So yeah, thank you.